Welcome to Novice Newbies, where I will show you some DIYs that I'm either trying out for the first time or that I'm relatively new at. The idea is that we learn together, get creative, and have some fun. So let's get into it. Hello. Okay, today we're going to attempt to make a coneflower. You see I've already made one right here. We're making these out of watercolor. I am not a professional, as you can see, but I do enjoy playing with watercolor because I feel like it has, it's good for beginners like me because there's a lot that you can fix that maybe you wouldn't be able to with other paints, or at least I haven't tried with other paints, but I find these really user-friendly because if you make a mistake, you can kind of add water and then mop it up with a paper towel. So what you will be needing today this is paper that you use for a watercolor. Let me just show you. So here it says actually watercolor on it. So if you used watercolor on regular paper, it probably wouldn't work the same, and you'll quickly find out the water would probably just soak up into the paper, whereas this one it kind of floats on top. It's a bit different. I bought this kit at Michael's in Canada a long time ago, before the pandemic, so I've had it for a long time, and most of these are still good to use. I mean, like, they're almost full, all of them, and I've been playing with these for ages, so I think they're amazing. So you really don't need to spend a fortune on any sort of professional kit. I paid under $40 I think for this back in the day. So and what I have here is my palette. So again, I don't remember if this came with the kit or if I purchased it separately, but what I did is I just put one little squirt of each color in here, and then you can make all your different colors on the bottom here. So these are the colors that I'm going to be using today to make the flower. That is for the center here, that's the stem, those are the petals, and I might dip into a few other of the colors. Other important things that you'll need are paper towel for picking up your mess or sometimes making highlights, and just a glass of water and some paintbrushes. This is the one I'm using right now. It's a good size, if you can see for reference. I really like that size. Okay, so we're gonna begin with the center, and like I said earlier, it's I've already kind of pre-mixed my colors because I did already make one. So I'm gonna start with the orangey color, and I'm gonna begin by making kind of a cone shape. What's really important to kind of play around with, I guess, is how much paint and water you have on your brush. It will kind of determine what your outcome is. So we're making this cone shape. I'm gonna grab a little bit more color and make some little spiky bits coming out of it. So another thing you're gonna want to play around with is the pressure that you're using. So if you pressed really hard here, it would make some thicker lines coming out, and then if you just flick with the end of your paintbrush, it just makes kind of fluffier, wispier strokes. We're going to cover this up, as you can see, in the final product with darker color anyway, and we can always come back and add more. Also, just to let you know, to create that color, I mixed some orange, yellow, and brown. So next we're going to get started on the beautiful petals. I'm going to go into the purpley, so for the petals I mixed purple and a dark red, and it made this really beautiful magenta color. Okay, in theory, according to the professionals, if you have a fine tip like this, you should be able to press down right at the start just with the tip, and then put the full body down hard and then lift up gently, and it should make the shape of a petal, but that did not work for me when I made the other one. So let's see what happens here. So if we touch down, pull, and then lift up. Yeah, see, that just shows me that I don't have enough water on my brush. Let's try again. There, do you see how that worked a little bit differently? Not perfect, but again, we're all learning here. So you can see, no, I've got a lot more water now, and that can make it a bit messier, but also you'll see I'm gonna pull some of that color up after. You can leave some room between the petals too if you want. Also, you can just do like you would when you're coloring and make your own shape rather doing it like I suggested. And I don't know, maybe that works better if you have a bigger brush, but you can make some of the petals touching, some of them can be separate. I think in the tutorial that I watch, you're supposed to like touch the top of the orange and it might bleed a bit into, oh, that's a term that they use when one color kind of seeps into the other color. They call that bleeding. And it's kind of a cool effect I'll show. I'm gonna do some of that later, but my tripod is kind of in an awkward spot for me to try and paint around it. That's why I have my hand in an awkward way. So you can see that right now it's quite one-dimensional because I had the same amount of water and paint on my brush when I made those petals, which is absolutely fine for now. And if you want to make it bleed like we were talking about earlier, and you're like, oh no, like it's not wet anymore, you can always take water out or add more water after you've finished. Like let's say I wanted to blend something out a little bit better, I can always add a bit more water. So let's good for now. Okay, so the next thing that the lady in the tutorial does is she actually adds darker hues to the bottom and lets them bleed upwards. But because I am not a professional and I can't work fast enough, I think it's probably dried a little bit. Oh, do you see how that pulled up some color? That's not a problem, you can always just do that. So let's try, I'm gonna just make a little bit more of my color here. And then I'm gonna add it to the bottoms and see if it bleeds up. And if it doesn't, I can just add more water. Yeah, see how it's not doing anything? Just gonna add a bit more water, see what happens. It's not working, guys. Let's add more water to the petal. So all these tips that the professional gives me, like, I just need to practice more, and so will you, before everything works like they tell you it should. So I suspect if I was working fast enough that it would not have been a problem to add the darker hues because they still would be wet. So what I should have done really is re-wet the whole petal first and then add the darker hues at the bottom. I feel like I'm losing the sharpness of the bottom of the petal here. So I think I'm going to do the same thing at the top. Maybe I'll just wet it a little bit first. So in watercolor you can do wet on dry or wet on wet. So if you paint on dry paper, it has a different effect than if you wet the paper first and then put the paint on top. But there are two methods that people use frequently, which is both have really cool effects. Nope, not working for me either. That's why we're learning together. So I probably don't have enough paint and too much water on my brush. Here we go. Let's see if that will bleed. Bleed. Oh, it might do it this time. You have to be a little bit patient sometimes too. It takes time for it to kind of seep down. Sometimes I'm not as patient as I should be. So the next thing that the lady in the tutorial does is she actually pulls up some of the color from the center for a highlight. I don't know if, oh yeah, I was gonna say, I don't know if mine is light enough yet, or dried enough, or too dry rather, oh my goodness, to pull up the color. But you can see that's how easy you can fix mistakes too, right? Like if you need to pull up the color and fix something, you can just wet it and pull up the color. That looks a bit harsh, so what I'm gonna do is just brush over it gently to blend it out a little bit better, so that it shows a bit of a highlight, but it's not like aggressive. Okay, we're gonna draw the stem in now, and honestly, my first flower was slightly on an angle, which I think made the stem a bit more attractive, but this one I think will have to go straight down, which is a bit weird, but we're gonna go with it because that's what the flower would look like if it was in real life. The stem would just be going straight down with not a lot of movement, so we'll just roll with it for today. For this color, I just mixed some green and brown to make a natural looking stem color. I didn't want it too bright green because I don't think that's what it would look like in real life. This is again where I think my trick for leaves didn't work for me last time, but technically if I have enough water and color on my brush, I feel like it should. So let's just see what happens here if I try to just gently, and then nope, not gonna happen in it. I swear I've done this before and it worked, but gently and then down. Oh dear. Don't worry if things are too light or too dark. Sometimes I leave white in the middle like you saw I did there because it just adds a natural highlight, which I think is fun. Sometimes if you start off really light like that, when it dries up you can add different hues. So okay, actually let's make it bleed. Let's see what happens here because it's still wet. Let's see how far that will travel up. Let's just see. So now I'm just actually going to let it fully dry so I can add a few more details at the end to make it look like the one on the left. Okay, so this is pretty much dried now, and I'm going to work on the center again. So what I'm mixing for that is a black and red, because it's supposed to be nearly black, but just not quite. So I'm mixing a bit of red into the black. I've also picked up a smaller brush, just sometimes if I need to do details, so I'm just gonna circle that round. And actually I think I probably have too much water and not enough paint in here. You can already tell it's not going to be dense enough. Just gonna add a bit more paint to my yeah, I wanted that to be a thin line, but that didn't really work that way. And then I'm going to start flicking. Yeah, I can already tell too much water, not enough paint. It worked out better the other side. Mop it up. Whoop. And redo. Black. Red. And the trick here is to make it denser on the bottom, and then look, you can see over here that there's more room left out on the top, because you kind of want the orange bits to be look like they're poking out from the dark. So you can almost have the whole bottom bit covered, then just more sprinkles at the top. And then even after it dries, you'll see that when you paint, that your colors will lighten up actually as they dry. As you might have noticed, my leaves dried, so there was a nice bleed that happened here. I messed with that one, that's why it didn't end up nice. That's okay. So like that. And then I'm going to add a bit more details to my petals. So I'm going to go back into my red purple mix. The professional called these colors actual names that I probably can't even pronounce, so for the sake of us, we're not going to do that today. So I'm going to just do some little quick lines on the bottoms and on the tops of each petal. And if they don't come up like you want, you can add some more after they dry, or you can make your paint a bit more dense, less water. You can play around with it to see what works. So do a bit on each one, and then I'm just going to outline the petals as well. You don't have to do all of them. You can do some, none, whatever you like. I just like to make them look a little bit more defined. Sometimes I can find it a little bit difficult to make stuff that's meant to look like realistic. Like some of the stuff that I like to play around when I paint normally looks a bit more cartoony. I find that's easier than making stuff that looks actually real. That's supposed to look real. Okay. I find it looks a bit harsh just here, so I'm just going to try and add a smidge more color. Okay, now I'm just going to add a bit more, like this green, this petal rather, looks a bit more color. Sometimes it actually looks really cool to have like several different, like you can tell that that part was painted at a different time than that part, like the different shades, this can look really cool. Might add some veins. To the petals. You can mess around with it until you're kind of happy with how it looks. Sometimes if I just want the same color but darker to add dimension, I'll just add a bit more black into it to make it darker. Sometimes that doesn't work for me, sometimes it does. If you want to soften it up, add more water. Oops. not gonna lie, this leaf ended up messier than I wanted. I might just have to wait till it's dry to sharpen it up. Anyway, that's the finished product. That leaf on the left didn't end up like I wanted it to, and you know what? It is what it is. It's gonna be fine. We all just need to practice and do the best that we can, and it's fun along the way. I really do enjoy painting, and I hope that you will too. Thanks for joining on this episode of Novice Newbies. See you next time.